Hi everyone, and welcome to the continuing adventure that is Tarot to the Nines. And today we have reached the power of the number 3. And it is a powerful number because 3 is the number of growth, of creativity, of development, of evolution. Everything can happen because 3 can happen. And so today we'll be exploring exactly how that works, particularly in relation to tarot. Now, in my last video, those of you who've been following the series will know that I talked in the last video about the movement away from nothingness and into somethingness and then into duality with the number 2, and the fact that that duality, the duality that we exist in our daily lives, in the real world as it were, although of course some would say that the real world is the illusory world, but we'll probably come on to that a bit later in the series. That duality, that tension between opposites, the fact that there was undifferentiated wholeness and then that wholeness reflected itself and was able to observe itself in duality, gives birth to the possibility of creation, of generation, of things developing. And I actually misquoted the 𝙇𝙄𝙉𝙆𝙎 in that video. I wasn't really quoting the 𝙇𝙄𝙉𝙆, I was kind of half kind of referring to it in principle, and I think I said something along the lines of the Tao says that the nothing gives birth to the something, and the something gives birth to two things, or nothing gives birth to the one gives birth to the two, and the two gives birth to the 10,000 things. The accurate quote, as was quite rightly pointed out to me by 𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙊𝙬𝙀, who reminded me also that it's chapter 42 in the 𝙇𝙄𝙉𝙎, is that the nothing gives birth to the one gives birth to the two gives birth to the 3, and the 3 gives birth to the 10,000 things. And the reason that makes sense is that the fact that the 3 can be created, that third thing from duality, is the indication that other things can be created. In fact, I'm going to read you the exact quote chapter from the 𝙇𝙄𝙉𝙎 itself, and this is the Stephen Mitchell translation, which I'm very fond of. Chapter 42. The Tao gives birth to 1. 1 gives birth to 2. 2 gives birth to 3. 3 gives birth to all things. All things have their backs to the female and stand facing the male. When male and female combine, all things achieve harmony. Ordinary men hate solitude, but the master makes use of it, embracing his aloneness, realizing he is one with the whole universe. So, really powerful stuff there in terms of the import of the number 3, and some metaphysicians and numerological scholars would say that actually 3 is the first of the real numbers, because it's the first and only one that can actually start moving and start self-generating, and it's the only number that can be aware of unity, because it is the third thing that is created between the wholeness and the separation of 1 and 2. Now, another viewer, 𝙈𝙀𝙉𝙆𝙎, and I hope I've pronounced it right this time, also pointed out something which I think is really telling, and that is that in the process of the numbers in the major arcana, the tarot is always a step ahead of itself and a step ahead of us. And I mentioned this in the last video as well, that actually we start off thinking that there is a 0 and that's the Fool, but in tarot the 0 is the first card in the major arcana. And then we get to number 1, the Magician, and we think we're at oneness now, but actually we've already got 2. We've got the Fool and the Magician. And then we get to the High Priestess, and the High Priestess is number 2. It's all about duality, but the tarot has already shown us duality, the 0 and the 1. We've got 2 cards. The High Priestess is the 3rd card, and of course the Empress, number 3, is the 4th card. So the tarot is always a little bit ahead of us. It's always reflecting back on itself, and I'll say a bit more about that when we come on to talk about the cards. But you can see straight away from the Empress in the Rider-Waite deck that the principles of creativity, of development, of fruition, of evolution, of abundance are absolutely writ large. This is a very powerful card in terms of indicating that growth and the birth of life. The birth of life. Now, the Empress, those of you who've been following my channel will know, is a rather important card to me because it's a card that in a very profound way connects me to the tarot and cements my interest in the tarot. And if you haven't heard my explanation of why that is, I'm not going to go into it here because it's too long and involved. I shall link my Empress video below, and you can have a look at that if you are interested. So that's the kind of initial take on that. You know, in terms of tarot being one step ahead of itself, I think it's worth bearing that in mind when we come to readings. So, what can we say about the number 3 in tarot? So, one of the things that springs to my mind is the proverb, good things come in threes. And we talk about 3 cheers. So there's a great deal of positivity associated with the number 3. And certainly in a number of religious and metaphysical and mystical context, number 3 is a really important thing. We hear about, you know, the Holy Trinity very often, Father, Son and Holy Ghost, the mind, body, spirit, the high self, middle self, lower self. There's lots of triplicities within metaphysical thought. And one of the reasons for that, as I mentioned, is that the 3 is the opportunity for unity, which has become duality, to become aware of unity again. So it's almost as though we have this undifferentiated wholeness, 1. It turns into duality, 2. So now we have separation. We have, as I said in the last video, we have the opportunity for connection, but we also have the opportunity for division. We have the opportunity for opposition. We have the opportunity for tension. And what number 3 does, by creating that third point that allows us to have a triangle, you know, the 1 gives us the point, the 2 gives us another point so we can have a line, and then the 3 gives us a third point so we can actually have a triangle. And we talk about triangulating. Triangulating is when we have maybe different perspectives and so on, and we triangulate to bring them together into a kind of cohesive whole that makes sense. That's the important thing. Number 3 makes sense. So for me, the 3 represents, in tarot, the 3 represents things like integration without negating duality. So it's not, the 3 is not a replacement for 1. It's not saying, oh, we need to go back to 1 in order to observe our unity. It's saying that we can remain in this dualistic world, but we can do so without there having to be tension, polarity, opposition. It is possible, even in this dualistic world where we are again, in a mystical sense, operating in the illusion of separation, it's possible for us to return to unity through integration and understanding, synthesis, and the ability of something to be created that is more than the sum of its parts. So the 3 resolves tension. It allows tension to be resolved. It gives hope of the resolution of polarized positions. It's a powerful number in the sense that it's the implicit idea is that 3 is able to give birth and be creative and be generative, and that can be a good thing. So the other thing that's worth thinking about is the luck that is associated with 3. So again, we talk about the power of 3, we talk about 3 cheers, and the other thing you might want to think about is in fairy tales. Very often in fairy tales, you know, many fairy tales will begin with, there were 3 sons and they went off on a journey, and very often the first 2 sons, bless them, end up coming a cropper because something goes wrong, or, you know, they're naive and get into trouble, or they are greedy and get into trouble. And then usually it's the 3rd son who is sometimes the youngest one, apparently the most immature, who somehow does best and comes back home with a kind of reward for his family. And there are many fairy tales and folk tales that have that kind of motif in them. So 3 succeeds, and it's almost as though it's like that kind of aphorism, 1, 2, through. It's like 3 is the breakthrough. It's the point at which things can really start moving forward. And we see this in tarot. If you look at the evolution of number in the minor suits, and again we'll come on to that in a second, you see that 3 is the point at which things really start to accelerate, and things start happening in the story of the suits when you get to number 3. So the other thing that's worth saying about 3 is probably I mentioned the triangle. So you get the 1 and the 2 and the 3, and that allows us to have a triangle for triangulation. You get beginning, middle, end. Even the way that we write 3, starts off with a beginning and it has a middle and an end. So we even write the number 3 in a way that highlights that kind of triplicity and the triunity of 3. So the shape of 3 is interesting, and I want to show you something from a very good book that's worth getting. If you're interested in number and the way that number is represented symbolically in tarot and in other disciplines, then this book, A Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe, The Mathematical Archetypes of Nature, Art and Science, A Voyage from 1 to 10 by Michael S. Schneider, is a very good book, and it's got some wonderful diagrams in it. And in this chapter, which is on the number 3 now, let me turn the light down so you can see. So you can see here that the triangle is born, and it's this kind of triangulation that gives us the triad. You'll notice, by the way, that it is born from, again, going back to this idea of each number containing the seed of the next number. So when we drew the dyad, let me put the light up again so you can actually see me and I don't just disappear into a haze. When we drew the monad, can you see this here? So let me get myself oriented to the left to right. Yes, so there's the monad. Remember that? And then the dyad was this. And that gives us that kind of polarity. And then I also talked about the way that the dyad can merge together, and that allows for union and then the suggestion of creation, and 3 is what comes out of that creation and indicates the possibility of more creation. Well, if you look at the symbol for the dyad, it's that symbol that Michael Schneider uses to show the birth of the triangle that creates 3-ness. So 3 comes from 2, and I mentioned in previous videos that the seed of each card is inherent in the card before it. So I'll come on to that a bit more in a second. So yes, in terms of where 3 appears and that triangle appears, the Empress and the 3s are very much about growth and generation and creation, hence the lovely little leaves on my 3 motif here. That was a subtle hint, subliminal message that 3 is about growth. There's a page in this book which gives some marvellous pictures, okay, I hope you can see that, of the way that 3-ness manifests in the natural world. So we've got the butterfly and the unbutterfly, just a housefly. We've got a cross section of a pepper and a cucumber, honeydew melon, and a flower. And what you see is very often that triangulation, that kind of 3-ness, the triplicity that is inherent in the natural world. It's everywhere. The idea that something has come from duality and 3-ness has allowed the flowering of everything that exists in the natural world. It's just written in there. So what I'd like to do is read you some quotes now, and some of them are from this book and a couple from other books that relate to 3-ness and what some scholars and philosophers have said about 3-ness. So Carl Jung said a couple of interesting things. Every tension of opposites culminates in a release, out of which comes the third. In the third, the tension is resolved and the lost unity is restored. So in that quote alone, you can see that the 1, 2, 3 are intimately connected. So you start with unity, duality leads to this tension, and the tension is resolved in the 3-ness, and the 3-ness is what allows unity to be restored because you've reconnected the duality of 1 and 2 into 3. So 3 is able to observe both duality and unity. Now, we are life. If you are watching this, I'm going to assume that you are alive. And you are life. You are the life that the Empress is representing. This natural world. You are the natural world. And you watching this video are capable of understanding the concept of duality and unity. And that's what Jung's getting at here. You are the product of that tension, and you can see the unity. The other thing that he says is the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. So again, this idea of something being more than the sum of its parts, and relationships are very much like that, aren't they? You know, you meet somebody, you like them, and your friendship is created. And your friendship is something that is more than just the sum of the two lives. If you just look at two people on paper and put them together, you can't really see what a friendship would be. It's only in actually forging a friendship or a loving relationship that you see what can come out of that. You know, another quote that's worth bearing in mind is Aristotle's quote: "A whole, it hold with a W, the whole, unity. A whole is that which has a beginning, middle, and end." Beginning, middle, and end. So in another way, three represents wholeness as well as representing this diversity and multitude. Homer also said, all was divided into three. Another quote. This is from the Bhagavad Gita. One whose intelligence has attained to unity casts away from him both sin and virtue. And that's an interesting quote to reflect on as well, because what that is saying to me is that if you are in any polarity, you're not whole. So whichever extreme you go to, you're not able to apprehend wholeness. And, you know, we see this if people are very blinkered and think that, you know, everything is rosy when it isn't, or equally think that everything is terrible when it isn't. There's got to be a balance between perspectives, because it's that balance that allows us to create something new. And it's true in social change. I mean, if we see terrible things happening in the world and we want to do something about them, do we just go, oh, it's terrible, and just collapse in a heap and stop doing anything? Or do we say, it's terrible, but there is hope for something better, and it's the hope for something better that allows us to be propelled into action? So this idea of tension leading to a third thing, moving us forward. And finally, another quote I want to just read to you, and again this is a Carl Jung quote. Three is an unfolding of the one to a condition where it can be known. Unity becomes recognizable. So again, going back to the idea that when three is born, we remember unity. We're outside of unity and duality, and when three is born, we're back to unity. So that's my little treatise on the numbers, or the number 3. So now let's have a look at the cards that relate to 3 and the constellation of the Empress. Okay, we're back again, and we're now going to look at the tarot cards themselves as we explore the constellation of the Empress and the number 3 within the deck. So I've arranged the cards, as you can see here, in a cup formation. That's my little symbol to represent cup. I hope you noticed that. That is a cup. The reason I've done that is that in Angelise Arian's book, the Tarot Handbook, she actually talks about each of the tarot constellations having what she calls an archetypal matrix, an archetypal form, and that relates to some of the meaning of the constellation. And for the constellation of the Empress, she puts together the picture in a cup formation like this. And the reason she does that is that she is describing this particular constellation as relating to different forms of love at a very basic level, but also to the capacity to which we either actively or just through dint of having a capacity to do so are able to open ourselves up to different forms of love. And what you see in the cards, certainly in the Rider-Waite deck, Rider-Waite-Smith deck, is that many of the images relate to different forms of love. So let's just have a look at the card. Now obviously we'll start with the Empress, obvious one to start with because this is her constellation. And again, I'll refer you back to my Empress dream. Those of you who've seen the video about that will know that the dream relates very much to a principle that is absolutely enshrined in the Empress, and that's the principle of mothering, of life, both the coming of life and the going of life. So linked below if you want to see more or hear more about that particular dream. And so this card for me is about abundance, it's about growth, it's about creation, it's about the manifestation of life in the world. It's about the manifestation of us as human beings and all the nature that we see around us. And it means life in a very profound sense. So you might say that this is kind of, basic is too banal a word, but basic love, original love, source love, if you like. And then what we have here is love in a couple of different forms, but related forms. So the Hanged Man, even in the image in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck and in other decks, you can see that there are connotations of crucifixion. Certainly there are connotations of vulnerability, sacrifice, being in a position where power is not with this person who is hanging suspended upside down. And in that there is the notion hinted at of unconditional love, because sometimes in this world our love of things can appear to be very conditional. So we love people when they behave in a certain way. We love our lives when they give us certain things. We love the world when it matches our expectations of it. But as we all know, sometimes that's not what happens. You know, bodies die, bombs fall, banks collapse, plans fail. Things don't always go the way that we mentally want them to go. And sometimes we just have to sacrifice and surrender to that. And in that often can be a feeling of profound unconditional love when you connect with a place in you that recognizes that it is possible to love without condition. So it's possible to love someone even if they don't meet your expectations or match up to your idea of how they should be, whether it's a person or a thing or an event or a life. So there's something there about unconditional love. And then in number 21, and these, remember, are related to the Empress because 12, 1 and 2, 1 plus 2 equals 3, and 21, 2 plus 3 equals 3. They numerologically reduce to the same number. They numerologically reduce to the number 3. 21, excuse me, is about a kind of universal love, and one might say a return to source. So we talked about the idea of the fool stepping out of the world of mystery and the birth of oneness and then of duality and then the possibility of creation, which 3 enshrines. But there is this hankering of returning to source. And what's interesting, if you remember, I said in the earlier section that the thing that's powerful about 3, and that Jung said about 3, is that 3 is the point that is able to look back and see and understand unity. So there is something in 3-ness about wholeness as well. And the other quotes I shared about the idea of everything having a beginning, middle and end, wholeness having a beginning, middle and end. So we're only 3 cards or 4 cards into the major arcana: Fool, Magician, High Priestess, Empress, and already in this constellation we're touching back on non-duality. And I want to just show you in a very profound and esoteric deck that I love very much. I don't have a copy of it here, but I've got the app, and that is the Tarot of Pagan Cats. I'm going to let me just put the light down a bit. This is the bit where I always get nervous that I'm going to throw us all into some kind of alternative dimension because I'm pointing my iPad at the iPhone. Hold on everyone, hold on. Right, here we go. Let's see, can you see that? I think you can see it. Okay, so that's the Fool. And we see that we've got this lovely little cat chasing the butterfly, possibly about to jump off the cliff, dreaming, thinking about being comfortable on a cushion with a saucer of milk. That's the Fool. Now, here is the world in this deck. And here we have the same little cat at the end of the journey, sitting on a cushion with a saucer of milk and dreaming about sitting on a cushion with a saucer of milk. And, you know, I'm kind of being slightly jokey about all of this, but I actually find this card incredibly moving, because for me, it enshrines something about the journey of the Fool, the transformation of the Fool within the major arcana. So, and it also says something to me about the human condition of, we step out of the mystery we're born into this weird and marvellous and mysterious and sometimes very painful world, where things are constructed in opposites, and we've got to try and find some kind of integrity within that in our journey. And very often, our pain comes from wanting things to be different than they are. So, there's that quote from Hamlet in, I think it's Act 2, Scene 3, where he says, there's nothing good or bad. He's talking to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. There's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And there's something there about the painfulness of life and the difficulty in life being about things, our expectations not matching up to the reality. And enlightenment, possibly, is being in a position where what you want and what you have are the same, but not necessarily because you've changed the external in order to get what you want, but perhaps because you've changed your expectation. I think I'll probably say more about that at some point in a future video. If you are interested in exploring a bit more of that, you might want to look at my video on, and again I'll link this below as well. This is turning into one of those videos where I say, see lots of other videos in order to understand what I'm saying. I did a video a while ago on the work of Byron Katie, who is a woman who talked from a non-dual perspective, and one of the things that she talks about being is a lover of what is, because to be anything else is painful. And her first book her first mainstream book is called Loving What Is, and in that there's a quote from her, I think, that says something like, what is what I want, anything else is confusion. And here, you know, we see this beautifully illustrated, the complete harmony of this little cat wanting and being exactly the same. So what it wants is exactly where it is. It doesn't want to be anywhere else. It is where it wants to be. So so there's something there in threeness about harmony as well. In fact, we talk about three-part harmony as well, don't we? So right, let's get back to the cards. So yeah, the different forms of love. Now, in terms of the minors, and remember, in the principle of the constellations, the minors offer us a mixture of opportunities and challenges. And it's probably fair to say that in the threes, they're pretty positive. So cups, wands, and pentacles generally look pretty positive. And you'll find that in most interpretive books on tarot, even if they're not illustrated pips, that the three cards are pretty positive. The number 3, they're pretty positive. Apart from the Three of Swords, which is well known as a problematic card. So I want to just say a couple of things about this, because I know that a lot of people struggle with this card. So, well, the first thing I noticed about it is this great, in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, is this great big red love heart. Now, the love heart image, to my knowledge, does not appear anywhere else in this deck. And I have always thought that it is a slightly out of place image in the deck, because there's something rather cliched about a love heart, isn't there? This idea, it's very Valentine's-y. And so I actually think that this card is not necessarily about the death of real love, which is how it's sometimes interpreted, but about the death of false love, the love that we build up in our minds that isn't realistic and isn't really love. It's about wanting. It's about attachment to a particular outcome or a particular person that might not be healthy, and that is created in the mind. And swords are about the mind and the intellect and that kind of airy quality. So perhaps what this card is reminding us when it appears in a reading is check your attachment. What are you attached to? What perspective on life are you holding on to? Because if you're holding on to something that's not going to happen, and your image, like the little cat, is not, unlike the little cat, is not matching up, that's where the pain comes. So I think there's something there about the three being about each of the threes in the minors are about the flowering of, the growth of something relating to the suit. And I would say that it may well be that the 3 is about what grows from overthinking and over expectation. So that's the 3 of Swords. 3 of Cups, I see this as being reunion. These look like 3 great buddies that have come together for a good old shindig. Lots of carousing. But maybe they've just met, so it could be about new friendship. But I tend to think about it as being with your friends, being reunited with people you love and care for. So again, there's that thing about reunification, a bit like the world, the return to source, that kind of reunion. Yeah, so that's that. In terms of this card, the sword. Now I always think about swords as being about our generative powers, our kind of passions, about our talents, about what we draw out from ourselves. And so for me, this chap reminds me of somebody who's looking out at well, it seems to be a body of water ahead of him, and imagining things and thinking about things and perhaps wondering about how to integrate things and having that kind of balance between the 3 points. So there's something there for me about integrity and imagination and about seeing what can be created using one's own inner gifts. And then what we might see here in the get it right, Brian, the Pentacles. We see someone who is enjoying the fruits of the labour of bringing something out from oneself. Somebody who's been through an apprenticeship and is now a skilled craftsman who has been learning and knows what he's doing and has carved very intricate patterns into that wall. So for me, that's what the 3 of Pentacles says. So there you are. Those are the cards of the constellation of the Empress. And again, your homework is for you to look at the cards that you've got in your favourite decks, look at the 3s, get them all together, lay them out on the floor in front of you, and think about what it is, those cards, and your own knowledge of the numbers, and your research by looking at videos like this and reading about these numbers in other sources. What does it tell you about what 3ness means to you? Because what I'm sharing with you here is what 3ness means to me from my studies. And the reason it works for me is because it resonates with me. And because when I see a 3 card, whether it's that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, or that one, appearing in a spread, all of the things I've discussed with you, all of the things I've described to you, are stimulated in my mind in different ways and at different times. For you to be a proficient tarot reader and to really connect with your cards at a very deep level, what you need to do is foster that for yourself, so that when you see the cards appear, it stimulates in your mind, in your psyche, what you have come to know these cards mean. That's what it means to become proficient at tarot. And of course, do all the reading that you need to do to understand the basics and the received wisdom that's out there. But don't lose sight of your ability to connect with your cards. This is internal work, interior work, and so much of what you will get from tarot, and indeed any kind of psycho-spiritual work, is in the connection between the tarot and yourself. So here we are with the 3 again. There's you, there's the tarot, and there's what springs out from the interaction between you and the tarot, the 3rd thing. So your homework for today is to go off and find your third thing. See you all again very soon. Take care everyone. Bye.